Chapter 21, Section 1, Interactive Reader, pages 311 through 314, worth 18 points. Weather. Air masses. Key ideas. As you read this section, keep these questions in mind. How does an air mass form? What are the four main types of air masses? How do air masses affect North America's weather? How does pressure affect the movement of surface air? Where do warm air masses form? Page 311. How does air move? Remember that air moves from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. Highlight that sentence. Again, highlight, remember that air moves from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. Continue highlighting. In general, surface air moves from the poles toward the equator. Continue highlighting. At high altitude, warm air flows from the equator toward the poles. Continue highlighting. These motions happen because the equator is generally warmer than the poles. Continue highlighting. Because the air at the equator is warmer, air pressure there is low. Continue highlighting. Air pressure at the poles is higher because the air there is colder. Question number 1. How does pressure affect the movement of surface air? Answer. Air generally moves from the poles. Air generally moves from the poles to the equator because there is low pressure at the equator. To the equator because there is low pressure at the equator and high pressure at the poles and high pressure at the poles. Again, air generally moves from the poles to the equator because there is low pressure at the equator and high pressure at the poles. The movements of air in the atmosphere create global wind belts. Highlight. The northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere each have 3 wind belts. Continue highlighting. Earth's rotation can influence the direction of these wind belts through the Coriolis effect. What is an air mass? Highlight. Air does not move much when air pressure differences are small. The air may stay in one place or move very slowly over an area. Highlight. If this happens, the air takes on the temperature and humidity of that region. Continue highlighting. A large body of air with similar temperature and moisture is an air mass. Continue highlighting. Scientists classify air masses by their source regions or the areas in which they form. Scientists use 2-letter symbols to describe air masses. Continue or highlight. The first letter in the symbol indicates whether the air mass is dry or moist. Continue highlighting. The second letter indicates whether the air mass is warm or cold. Continental. Type of air, dry, symbol, lowercase c. Maritime. Type of air, moist, symbol, lowercase m. Tropical. Type of air, warm, symbol, capital T. Polar. Type of air, cold, symbol, capital P. Where do warm air masses form? Answer, tropical areas. Tropical areas. Page 312. How do continental air masses affect the weather of a region? Which type of maritime air mass forms over the Arctic Ocean? Why? What type of weather does the continental polar air mass bring? Continental air masses. Highlight. Continental air masses form over large bodies of land such as northern Asia and southwestern United States. Continental air masses have very low humidity because they form over land. Highlight. In general, continental air masses bring dry weather when they move into other regions. Continue highlighting. There are two types of continental air masses: continental polar, CP, and continental tropical, CT. Continental polar, continue highlighting, continental polar air masses are dry and cold. Continue highlighting. Continental tropical air masses are dry and warm. Question 3. How do continental air masses affect the weather of a region? Answer, bring dry weather. Bring dry weather. Maritime air masses. Highlight. Maritime air masses form over large bodies of water such as the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. These air masses usually, highlight, have higher humidity than continental air masses do. Maritime air masses, highlight, bring precipitation and fog when they move to a new region. There are two types of maritime air masses. Highlight. Maritime polar, MP, and maritime tropical, MT. Highlight. Maritime polar air masses are moist and cold. Continue highlighting. Maritime tropical air masses are moist and warm. Question 4. Which type of maritime air mass forms over the Arctic Ocean and why? Answer, maritime polar. Maritime polar, because the Arctic Ocean is near the North Pole. Because the Arctic Ocean is near the North Pole. And the mass formed over the ocean. And the mass formed over the ocean. Again, maritime polar, because the Arctic Ocean is near the North Pole, and the mass formed over the ocean. What air masses affect North America? Highlight. An air mass usually brings the weather of its source location. Continue highlighting. However, an air mass may change as it moves away from its source location. For example, cold, dry air may become warm and moist as it moves from land to a warm ocean. The lower layers of the air become warm and rise. As the air rises, clouds and precipitation may form. Highlight. The air masses that affect the weather of North America come from 6 places. The table below shows the sources, movements, and weather of these air masses. Air masses in North America. CP, source region. Polar regions in Canada. Movement, south, southeast. Weather, cold and dry. Air mass. MP. Source region, polar Pacific, polar Atlantic. Movement, southeast, south-southwest. Weather, cold and moist. Air mass, CT. Source region, southwestern United States. Movement, north-northeast. Weather, warm and dry. Air mass, MT. Source region, tropical Pacific, tropical Atlantic. Movement, northeast, north-northwest. Weather, warm and moist. Question 5. What type of weather does the continental polar air mass bring? Highlight in the table CP. Highlight cold and dry under weather. Your answer to question number 5, cold and dry. Page 313. How is the summer in the southwestern United States different from the summer in the southeastern United States? Which air mass brings dry, hot weather in the summer? Tropical air masses. Highlight. Continental tropical air masses form over the deserts of the southwestern United States. These air masses bring highlight dry, hot weather in the summer. They do not form in winter. Highlight. Maritime tropical air masses form over the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean Sea, and the Gulf of Mexico. Continue highlighting. These air masses bring mild, cloudy weather to the eastern United States in winter. Continue highlighting. In summer, they bring hot, humid weather and storms. Maritime tropical air masses also form over the Pacific Ocean. During summer, they do not usually reach the Pacific coast. In winter, maritime tropical air masses bring precipitation to the coast and the southwest. Question 6. How is the summer in the southwestern United States different from the summer in the southeastern United States? The southwest is hot and dry. The southwest is hot and dry. The southeast is hot and humid with storms. The southeast is hot and humid with storms. Again, the southwest is hot and dry. The southeast is hot and humid with storms. Polar air masses. Highlight. Continental polar air masses form over ice and snow in northern Canada. Continue highlighting. These air masses move into the northern United States. Continue highlighting. In summer, they bring cool, dry weather. Continue highlighting. In winter, they bring very cold weather. Continue highlighting. Maritime polar air masses form over the North Pacific Ocean and reach the Pacific coast. Continue highlighting. In winter, they bring rain and snow. Continue highlighting. In summer, they bring cool, often foggy weather. Continue highlighting. These air masses lose their moisture as they move over the Rocky Mountains. Continue highlighting. As a result, they can bring cool and dry weather to the central United States. Continue highlighting. Maritime polar air masses also form over the Atlantic Ocean. These air masses usually move east toward Europe. Highlight. Sometimes they move west over eastern Canada, and the United States. In winter, they bring cold, cloudy weather and snow. In summer, they bring cool weather and fog. The diagram on the right. The air masses that affect the weather in North America are named according to their source regions. Top left, Maritime, Polar, Pacific. Center top, Continental, Polar, Canadian. Top right, Maritime, Polar, Atlantic. Bottom left, Maritime, Tropical, Pacific. Bottom center, Continental, Tropical. Bottom right, Maritime, Tropical, Atlantic. Question 7. Which air mass brings dry, hot weather in the summer? Answer, Continental, Tropical. Continental, Tropical. Page 314. How does an air mass form? What are the 4 main types of air masses? Use the charts below to compare the types of maritime and continental air masses. How do tropical air masses affect North America? How do polar air masses affect North America? Suppose a continental polar air mass replaced a maritime tropical air mass. How would temperature and humidity change? Explain your answer. Question 1. Answer. Air stays in place or moves slowly over an area. Air stays in place or moves slowly over an area. And takes on the temperature and humidity of the area. And takes on the temperature and humidity of the area. Again, air stays in place or moves slowly over an area and takes on the temperature and humidity of the area. Question 2. Continental polar. Continental polar. Maritime polar. Maritime polar. Continental tropical. Continental tropical. And maritime tropical. And maritime tropical. Again, continental polar, maritime polar, continental tropical, and maritime tropical. Question 3. Symbol is given, CP. Under continental tropical, right top box, the symbol will be lowercase c, capital T. Lowercase c, capital T. Weather under continental polar, cold and dry. Cold and dry. Weather under continental tropical, warm and dry. Warm and dry. Symbol under maritime polar, lowercase m, capital P. Lowercase m, capital P. Symbol under maritime tropical, lowercase m, capital T. Lowercase m, capital T. Weather under maritime polar, already given, moist and cold. Weather under maritime tropical, warm and moist. Warm and moist. Again, your top right box in the first table should be lowercase c, capital T. Weather under continental polar should be cold and dry. Weather under continental tropical should be warm and dry. Your symbol under maritime polar should be lowercase m, capital P. Your symbol under maritime tropical should be lowercase m, capital T. Your weather under maritime tropical should be warm and moist. Question number 4. They bring warm air. They bring warm air. Question number 5. They bring cold air. They bring cold air. Question number 6. Temperature and humidity would decrease. Temperature and humidity would decrease. Because a continental polar air mass forms over a cold area with land. And a maritime tropical forms over a warm area with water. Forms over a warm area with water. Again, temperature and humidity would decrease because a continental polar air mass forms over a cold area with land, and a maritime tropical forms over a warm area with water.